Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
Flint-Goodridge Hospital in New Orleans, once the premier hospital for blacks in the Deep South, is closing its doors. Up front today, we'll look back at its rich history. Our one-to-one segment takes us to Erwinville, Louisiana, where Genevieve Stewart will be talking to Maggie Collins, a lady with a decorator's touch. Then we'll visit the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts and meet Lula Elzy, a very talented dancer choreographer. I'm Rob Hinton, and we'll have those stories today on Folks.
Everybody says folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks who live, folks got to give, folks got to care, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of us, who touches us all? To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Folks. A little more than 2 years ago, we dedicated one entire program to Flint-Goodridge Hospital in New Orleans. Now, the hospital was owned by Dillard University. That is until 1983, when the university sold it to National Medical Enterprises. Recently, NME announced that it plans to close Flint's doors come May 17th. Well, up front today, we're going to share with you a portion of that program we did 2 years ago. The program dealt with the hospital's rich history and the unsuccessful attempt by a group of black doctors to buy the facility.
In 1869, Straight College in New Orleans, one of the first black colleges in the South, made known its intention to open a medical school. But the move was blocked by the Louisiana Supreme Court. Political strategies changed, and a year or so later, New Orleans University, another black institution, announced in its charter plans to open a medical school. State approval was granted, but grudgingly. We can only speculate that the school's approval was due in part to the efforts of then Lieutenant Governor C.C. Antoine and Secretary of State P.G. Dillard. Both men were black and signed the university's charter in 1873. However, the dream of opening the medical school's doors was still 16 years down the road, while the struggle for funding ensued. While efforts were continuing to launch a medical school, a group of black women began working to open a training school for nurses. The women ran into some financial difficulties, but soon New Orleans University came to the rescue.
You see, the university was able to secure funding for both schools. John Flint of Massachusetts funded the medical college, and the family of Sarah Goodrich funding the nursing school. Hence, in 1889, New Orleans University opened Flint Medical College and the Sarah Goodrich Nurse Training School. But soon major stumbling blocks got in the way. Students had been promised access to Charity Hospital to practice clinical medicine, but such access was never permitted. In 1900, the federal government provided the university with a teaching hospital adjoining the medical college on Canal Street. However, the 20-bed facility was insufficient for training 65 medical students and 16 nursing students. In 1910, the American Medical Association withdrew its accreditation, but Flint-Goodridge Hospital remained open. In 1929, New Orleans University and Straight College merged to form Dillard University, and Dillard became the new owner of the hospital. At the time, New Orleans had the highest black mortality rate among America's largest cities, attributed mostly to deadly diseases from unsanitary living conditions. A larger hospital was definitely needed.
Under Dillard University, the hospital's board of directors launched a fundraising drive to build a new facility. In 1932, the new Flint-Goodridge Hospital opened its doors on Louisiana Avenue. Albert Dent, an Atlanta businessman, was named superintendent, even though he had no experience in hospital organization and administration. Dent conceived a postgraduate internship program for blacks. It attracted physicians from all across the country. For example, Dr. Urban Mays, Dr. Isidore Cohen, Dr. Rivers Fredericks, and Dr. William Adams, who joined the Flint-Goodridge staff back in 1929 and was on hand when the hospital moved to its present location.
The hospital did need to expand. It was too crowded down there. There was no space for expansion. The Methodist Church and the Congregational Church had some discourse, and they made up their minds they could get a piece of property uptown. And the late Bishop R.E. Jones, about whom some of you probably know, was instrumental in getting the land there on the corner of Louisiana Avenue and Ferret and LaSalle Streets. It was a whole block. At that time, it was occupied by an old theater on the downtown corner, and cross paths, just like cow paths, were leading back and forth. So they secured that land, and the Negro Doctors Association also had some money which they put into it. It became a training center for interns who came to the city, and because we were at that time woefully short of well-trained black doctors, as were the white population too. So we set the place up there, and it was a multi-purpose hospital. As I indicated to you a little while ago, it had all the services that any general hospital has.
During the days of Jim Crowism, Flint-Goodridge Hospital was the only hospital in Louisiana where black physicians could practice medicine. At Charity Hospital and a few other state-owned institutions, black patients were placed in C and W wards. The colored wards were often located in a cold, damp basement. Flint-Goodridge was the only salvation for black patients.
The hospital has served Louisiana admirably. Just ask Dr. Joseph Labat, Chief of Staff at Flint-Goodridge and a New Orleans native.
Well, Flint-Goodridge as a child was a mecca for medical care for the black patient in New Orleans. I was born there in 1937, and it was probably you would say it was the only hospital where the private pay patient could receive services. The other hospitals as a child, during my childhood years, were segregated, and we had no access to care in the other institutions of the city. Flint-Goodridge, when I returned to the city, was a very viable institution. It was undergoing some changes at that time, promulgated mostly by the entrance of a greater number of younger minority physicians into the New Orleans community. Along about 1971, I must maybe update it a little bit. In 1970, the first medical school graduates were finishing their training at the local institutions. So it was just about those years when we started to get locally trained black physicians settling in the New Orleans environment.
But about a year and a half ago, Dillard University decided to sell the hospital.
We have put a lot of money in Flint-Goodridge Hospital. In fact, over the last 18 months, we have put more than $2 million in terms of operating money from Dillard University. We simply can't afford it. So it's primarily economic reason. There's another reason, however, and that is Dillard is an institution of higher learning. We're committed to life of the mind, nurturing young people to develop that mind. We simply cannot afford the time and energy and the resources to devote to hospital administration. So we want to get out of that field and devote all our time and energies and resources to the whole business of higher education. So there are two reasons, economic and professional obligation.
For a number of years, the trustees had been alerted to the fact that the business side of Flint Hospital was slipping, and there need to be some corrections made. And I want you to understand that the doctors have nothing to do with that. We don't hire anybody, we don't fire anybody. And I think to some extent our record will show that what I'm saying can be documented. A little later on, when the hospital began to slip financially on account of an overload of Medicaid patients, about which you know well, and the fact that Medicaid and Medicare do not pay a full complement of the patient's expenses, only a percentage. Some of the poor people who came in there could not get enough money to pay their balances. And so we accumulated a constant deficit, which has been the case with hospitals all around the nation. So there's nothing pertinent to Flint Hospital alone. It is a common hospital problem.
When Dillard University announced its plans to sell Flint-Goodridge Hospital, approximately 50 black physicians got together to form Doctors Hospital Group Incorporated. The doctors had hoped to buy the hospital, to preserve its heritage, and to continue its service to the black community. However, the doctors ran into some problems, the biggest one being money.
Our attempt to secure finances from the New Orleans financial community has been nothing short of a dilemma. We had 50 men at first, and of course, through the course of discussions and negotiations, that number has fallen. But even in the beginning phases of this project, when we had 50 men and the numbers were in the range of $3.2 million, everywhere we went to seek finances, it seems as though the door was closed. We were never in a situation where we actually had a negotiation of dollars with Dillard on a time frame which would permit any institution to loan anyone $3.2 million. The time frame was always in a period of 2 to 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and no one is going to loan a bunch of strangers $3.2 million for a medical facility in the times of the Reagan administration. It was almost an impossible task based on the time frames that we had to work with.
We negotiated with them for more than 18 months. We gave them every possible break. We gave them preferential treatment. There's everything possible. We wanted them to have it because we wanted the hospital to remain within the black community because of its symbolism and its historic contribution. But we can't simply give it away. We got too much invested in there because after all, this money comes from the Dillard University operating budget. So the doctors talked a great deal. They talked a great game, but they never put up any money. They never put up one dime in terms of a commitment. I said, we bent over backward, believe me, for more than 18 months. But they simply could not come up with the financing, the package. Why, I don't know, but they never came up with it.
We need to point out that Joe Labat is no longer chief of staff at Flint. The interview with him was conducted at the time of the pending sale. Again, Flint-Goodridge Hospital, once the premier hospital for blacks in the Deep South, is closing its doors May 17th. Time now for our one-to-one segment, which this week features a woman with a decorator's touch. Here's Genevieve Stewart.
Many people are afraid to pursue their talents, especially in interior decorating. Well, on a quiet road in Erwinville, Louisiana, we found a closet decorator who discovered she had a creative knack for interior design and pursued it. Maggie Collins has no formal education or training in interior decorating. She has turned her house into a personal laboratory, and the finished product is smashing. As most good things originate, she started by ideas floating around in her head.
Well, I get some of my ideas out of magazines and at night while I'm in bed looking at books and just thinking about different things and how I would like my house to look.
In terms of your wallpaper and a lot of the supplies that you use, where do you get those?
Usually browsing through stores. I go to wallpaper places and maybe tile companies. They'll have a lot of things that I would like to use.
Do you think people are afraid to experiment with colors?
Yes, most people are. They like to stick to basic colors. The new colors that they've come out with, people don't like to use them because they're afraid of them, unless a designer would go in and start working with them. But I like to use different colors. I like to experiment, and I could always change it if I didn't like it.
Maggie Collins' home is 14 years old. As was the style then, the colors were dark earth tones in the Spanish motif. Well, she tired of the dark, dreary walnut paneling in her kitchen, but replacing wooden cabinets is an expensive proposition.
The kitchen was done before in walnut, dark walnut. Everything was dark. Paneling, the cabinets, the floor, everything was dark. And that needed to be changed. So I decided to go into it, and instead of ripping out all the cabinets, I decided to paint it. And in doing so, I was very pleased with the results.
And your refrigerator, how did you handle that?
The refrigerator was also painted Wayne did the refrigerator himself. He took it out into the garage and he stripped it, and it was the gold color, and he did it in an antique white, and it came out beautiful.
About how much did it cost him to do that?
About $40.
Whereas if you had it done commercially, it would have cost how much to have it painted?
About $150. And you can save a lot by doing it yourself.
Do it herself she does. With some assistance from her husband, Wayne, Maggie stripped her cabinets, laid the quarry tile floors, floated the paneled kitchen walls, and hung her new wallpaper. A neighbor assisted her in tracing the design for this wooden cornice board from an old vinyl floor, and her husband cut the wood and installed it. She doesn't sew. Consequently, the expensive-looking, custom-made kitchen curtains were ordered from a catalog. In most other things, Maggie believes in rolling up her sleeves and doing it herself.
I do all of the painting, all of the papering, and everything else that needs to be changed. And my husband, he does the carpentry work.
Have you ever messed up on wallpaper?
Oh, plenty of times. You just go back and start over again. That's what most people have to do, just keep trying. It's not very hard. Sometimes you'll run into some problems, but if you work with it a while, you'll get it.
Believe it or not, the cost of this new kitchen was not phenomenal. Maggie was ever mindful of her budget. The breakdown of cost is within reason of many household budgets, especially if it's done gradually.
The wallpaper in the kitchen, I'd say, cost about $125 for all of it.
And in terms of your new tile floor in the kitchen?
Well, the tile floor in the kitchen actually didn't cost that much as opposed to putting vinyl flooring, because with the money that we allowed for, we were able to do the dining room and the hall too on that budget, on the $800.
And that's because you did a lot of the work yourself?
Yes, we did some of the work, and we got some friends of ours to help us do it.
And in terms of, let's say, the paint and painting your cabinets and putting the Formica in, about what was that?
Genevieve, the paper, the wallpaper in the kitchen and the countertops, that all came to about $500. Without breaking it down, you know, it came to about that much.
So in other words, people can have a totally new look in their kitchen if they wanted to, for a little more than $1,000.
Oh, yes. Yes. The biggest expense in there, if you're not going to put new cabinets, would be the wallpaper, if you want to put wallpaper. But if you just want to change your countertops and do your cabinets and paint your cabinets, that's a saving right there. Because if you had to go in and put custom-made cabinets, you'll really pay a lot for it. And I think painting them is just as pretty.
Since Maggie's kitchen flooring allowance permitted her to do 3 rooms for the price of 1, why stop at the kitchen? Her adjacent dining room was the next project. Out came the paint buckets again. She wallpapered over the once dark paneling and coordinated it with the dusty rose colors in the kitchen. The blue trim tied in and picked up the colors in her den. In furnishing the den, Maggie considered her 4 active children. The durable leather couches were found half price on sale. Money saved by doing-it-yourself decorating is used to add to her collection of antiques, accessories, and porcelain figures. Her advice to other aspiring decorators is, don't be afraid to experiment.
All they need to do is get out there and try. You can experiment. You can go out and get very cheap wallpaper, or I shouldn't even say cheap. Okay, very cheap wallpaper, and well, just to experiment with. And you can try it on a wall. You can try it in your garage where nobody would really see it. You'd be looking at it yourself. And if it looked good in there when you put it on, you can get some more paper and try it on your walls wherever you wanted to put it. And I find that a heavier paper is much easier to work with than a light paper. If you get a heavy-backed paper, you'll get a better result, especially if you're new at it and don't know what to do, because that light paper is very hard to work with.
Aside from her decorating abilities, Maggie is an accomplished, self-taught landscaper. The gazebo was built by her husband, but the digging, planting, loving care, and landscape design is another Maggie Collins original.
I like to landscape. I like to experiment with my yard. And that also, if there's something, when I do it, I don't like it, I just take it apart and redo it again.
The bottom line for aspiring do-it-yourself decorators is to consult merchants on ways to install wallpaper, flooring, and paint that are practical. And don't be afraid to experiment. As Maggie Collins said, all you need to do is to get out there and try. Exercise your creative talents.
We now go to our Something Extra segment, which today features a young lady who is making a career out of dancing. This is one of the modern dance classes at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. It is taught by 28-year-old Lula Elzy, a native New Orleanian. Dancing is Lula's life, so she says.
Life, you know, dancing is also the thing of youth. Like, people go through a whole trend of trying to stay young all their lives, but if you're a dancer, you found that fountain of youth because it keeps you alive, and then you work with children and you're on the stage and you have to have all of that energy.
But it hasn't always been that way. You see, she developed her interest in dancing at age 17.
Very, very late. I have always gone to the ballets, and especially the people that were doing Holiday on Ice, you know, seeing all the skaters, and look at pictures in the book and then try to figure out how they were doing the steps. And I was basically a shy person, so when I started to dance, everybody was surprised. You know, but that would pique my interest because I love to see the body moves across the stage and all the energy. And I say, yeah, that's what I want to do now.
Lula also attended the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, but after graduating from high school, her original plan was to become a history teacher.
Well, I was going to Southern University in New Orleans, and I was working, and I was also dancing with an African company. And one day I was in class, and through a history test, I said, well, you must be crazy or something. You can't do it all, so you have to make a decision. And as I worked, I saved a lot of money, and I decided to go to New York. And once I got there and saw all the people that were dancing, and they were waiting on tables and all that because they loved the art so much, you know, it just kept me going and going. And I said, well, if they could do it, I could do it.
But dancing became an obsession. And in the summer of 1978, it took her to New York, where she danced in Alvin Ailey's summer program.
It was wonderful at the Alvin Ailey School because they had so many people there who really wanted to dance, you know. And you go into the building and everybody was always stretching and the music was going and you hear the teachers screaming and shouting and everybody was sweating. You know, you say, wow, this is going to be like, I'm going to give this a try. And it was like basically 50 to 60 people in class, so you had to do everything and do it very well so the teacher noticed you and noticed that you were interested in being a dancer and that you were there to work, and then you had to go every day. You know, you don't want to go one day and then skip 5 days. They don't remember who you are. But that was a wonderful school to start at because we had to do ballet, the jazz, the modern, and also Dunham, which is close to the African style of dance, so it was great.
4 years later, Lula danced her way to Russia.
That was interesting. It was wonderful because all the people who were there who were dancers, you know. That were going to be their whole life, and you could tell, you know, they were very serious. And then when you have 80 people and they're all good, you know, it gives you something else to strive for. So that was an interesting trip. I enjoy that.
In addition to teaching, Lula is the director and choreographer of her own dance troupe called the Performing Company.
Ah, the Performing Company. I was dancing with like 3 other groups, and other people were doing the choreography, and I just loved to dance. I just wanted to dance, so it really didn't matter. But as time went on and people were moving in and out of town, having different opinions what things should be, and so I decided that I should form my own little group. At first I thought about no more than about 5 or 6 people, and then people started to get interested, and so it grew to about 10. And some of the people that I've danced with before in the past joined the group, and then I got stuck with doing the choreography, so that was something new.
But back in the classroom, she puts her students through the paces.
To enjoy it, whether the students want to be dancers or not, you know, whether they just want to sit in the audience and appreciate dancing or appreciate any form of art. If they're doing it themselves, then they understand the hard work that went into it and all of the aches and pains that it took just to do one step. So every time I teach and so I tell them to enjoy, to smile, to tell themselves they love what they're doing, although their body really hurts, you know, they'll get over it, you know, and the sweat, everything is worth it.
Even though Lula started dancing at a late age, she feels she has many good performing years ahead of her.
An advantage to a certain extent, because I feel now that I could go on till about 45. Some dancers start really, really early, and then they have to stop about 30. But I think I could dance right through those years. And the disadvantage is that if I would have started younger, I think I would have more technique. And that's the basics, because when the talent goes, the technique lasts. So in the process of being a dancer and a teacher, I still have to take more classes and a great deal of basic classes so I could really get into all of the technique of dancing.
And if you're wondering between teaching and performing which she finds more rewarding, well, Lula says...
Performing. I say performing because I like the feeling and the growth of it, and I love to see the people in the audience react and to say that they wouldn't come backstage and say, I've enjoyed it, and how did you do it, and how long did it take you to do it? And, you know, I like teaching also because I understand the problems of some students starting very late, you know, being a dancer, so. But the performing is, yeah, that's it.
Lula Elzy, truly a remarkable dancer. Well, the 84-85 season of Folks is almost at an end, and we'll be spending the summer months putting together programs for the coming fall season, but we need your help. What we'd like for you to do is to write us and tell us about people in your area who you feel should be featured on Folks. I emphasize the word write because we simply don't have time to take a lot of phone calls or receive people who happen to wander in off the streets. Please write. What we'd like to do is spend a week in Monroe, Lake Charles, Shreveport, Alexandria, all of our transmitter sites. So do let us hear from you. Our address is 2618 Wooddale Boulevard, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70805. Next fall, folks, will be entering its 5th year, so we really do want to hear from you. Also, if you, your company, or some company you know is interested in underwriting folks, please contact us. We are in very serious need of some underwriting. Okay, enough of that. We'll be back next week with another edition of Folks, and we hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.